Good morning. So we have several guests up here this morning. We have the youth choir and we have the Pelletier sisters. And we're going to do things a little bit different this morning. We have a little bit different rundown of some extra special music and thing like that. But we're going to have you start singing right away. So let's stand together and we're going to start with Just a Closer Walk with Thee.
I was watching to see. I didn't know. Welcome, and what a great gift it is to be together, and especially with our special singers. Thank you for sharing with us this morning. That piece, Just a Closer Walk with Thee, what a perfect way to begin this day where a lot of what we need to be asking ourselves if we want to be Christian, if we want to be people of faith and to live as Christians is, how do we do that? Well, the best way is to say what Jesus said, follow me. Then that means we need to ask what Jesus would in fact do in each and every particular moment of time. to dig deep, to open our hearts and to hear it anew. And so we do ask that question. We gather and say, just a closer walk. Let us take that walk. Let us seek and hear that walk, how we need to do it. Thank you for being here this morning and for sharing with us online as well. This morning I share with you just a few pieces. One is the take a walk in these shoes, another walk. I'm told there's still about 5 or 6 spots out of 50 that are available. So if you want to share this Tuesday night, and you do, it's a good thing to be a part of, make sure you sign up soon. We do have to cap it at 50. The second is that next Sunday at the 10 o'clock service, our children from Camp Wednesday will be sharing their musical in the midst of our worship service at 10 o'clock. So that's a wonderful thing to see. We also will have our 8:30 and our 11:25 that will be much like normal. And then next Sunday afternoon, Joy Fenton Jones, who's been connected to this church for more than 20 years, we will be having her ordination into ministry right here in this space next Sunday at 5 o'clock. A joyous moment in the life of the church. Share with us then as well. And so let us step out of the tension and busyness of our everyday. Let us open our hearts. Let us seek to hear God's presence in the here and the now. Let us worship together.
Let us begin with prayer. If you will join with me in the prayer on the screen. Meet us, risen Christ, on the road to Emmaus. Journey with us. Be our companion and guide. Be our teacher and friend. Be our host and servant. Open our minds to notice the signs of your presence around us. Open our hearts to receive your love, hope, and joy. Empower us to pass on to others the grace you have so freely with us. Amen. our Bible story today, we're going to hear it in two parts. So this first part, it is still that, what we call the third day. It is what we know as Easter morning. The women have gone to the tomb, and the tomb is empty. They ran back to tell the 11 disciples and the other disciples about what had happened. It was just unbelievable, amazing, hard to understand and comprehend. Later that day, two of the followers of Jesus, they decide to leave Jerusalem. They're going to go to Emmaus, which is about a 7-mile journey. They're ready to leave town. And so they're walking along, trying to process everything that happened. They're talking about it, asking questions, thinking through it, and this stranger comes up along with them. And the stranger says, "What are you talking about?" And the two followers of Jesus, they stop, and they just look crestfallen, and they're like, "Are you the only person, the only stranger in Jerusalem who doesn't know what happened these last several days?" To be continued.
Amen.
So that empty grave, that's what those followers of Jesus and that stranger talk about as they continue on the road to Emmaus, a road that would be dangerous for anybody to travel. And so it gets to be nightfall, and they know they have to stop. They get to their place in Emmaus, and the two followers say, "Stranger, please, stay with us." He would look like he was ready to keep going, but they know, stay with us. And so they go in and they get settled, they have a meal together. And what happens when that stranger breaks the bread? They recognize it's Jesus. The risen Christ has been walking with them. And then he disappears. And those followers, they say to one another, weren't our hearts burning all along the road? Wasn't there something within us that was stirred? And so they immediately, again, it was evening, they immediately got up, went back to Jerusalem, went back to the 11 disciples and the rest of the followers, and they said, indeed, Jesus is risen. And they told everything that had happened to them on that journey. God's story, God's word for us. Amen.
Everybody want? I want to see you. I want to see you. How? Where? What can we, well, we'll get there. First, I'm sure that most of you have heard some version of the joke, and it comes in so many different versions, but that joke that says that thing about a Muslim, a Jew, and a Christian, ... But I want to share my own version, my own piece that, well, my version, it goes like this. A rabbi, an imam, and a minister meet up at a bar. No, it can't be a bar. Muslims don't drink. So maybe, okay, try this. A rabbi, an imam, and a minister, they meet up at a clam shack. That can't be it. Shellfish, that's not kosher for the Jew, and also it goes against for the Muslim. So maybe the third try. How about this? A rabbi and a minister meet in the backyard of an imam. And they become good friends. They even see and know and experience God there because it's not a joke. Because it's faithful. Because what was the song we just sang? Open the eyes of my... How do we find God now? Well, it's a question of how do we follow Jesus. We do what Jesus would do. And if we take seriously what Jesus would do in each moment, Jesus would broaden the spaces. Seek to find God in places that others might not look. But that comes later. First, we need to go back about 7 years ago now. It was spring of 2016, right about this time of year. And that year, we decided that we were going to make First Serve Interfaith. For those who don't know what First Serve is a really big deal for this church. Started it about a dozen years ago. It's the Sunday after Labor Day. We go out as a huge community to serve in a means to form relationship. Building relationships with people we might not otherwise know through care and through love. So back in 2016, we decided to make it interfaith. And decided that we were going to do it by inviting the synagogue just around the corner, Temple Beth Shalom, and the mosque over in Cuyahoga Falls on Steele's Corner Road, the Islamic Society of Akron and Kent. So I called the rabbi, and I called the imam, and I explained what I was asking, if they would want to join with us, be partners with us in forming relationship in the midst of a world where there was so much brokenness, as there is today, among peoples of all different types, and faith was a big piece of it. So I called the two of them, and they both immediately were all in. All in until the rabbi learned that a mosque was going to be a part of it. Until the imam learned that a synagogue was going to be a part of it. That made both of them really, really nervous. Both understandably feared the ill that had been done to their own people by people of the other faith, or at least the ill that had been done by people who claimed that faith, who used that other faith as a way to hide behind the ill they were going to do. But finally, reluctantly, I convinced both of them that they would bring their communities in and be a part of First Serve that year. And we had our send-off service right here. It was packed. There, the second Sunday of September 2016. And then for the service, each of us, the rabbi, the imam, and I, were each going to speak for about 5 or 6 minutes. I didn't care which, but the order that we would go in, that became a debate. Who would get to go last? But both the rabbi and the imam, they wanted that position. I suspect it was just in case they needed some sort of rebuttal, some sort of clarification, if they felt like they had somehow been mistreated by the earlier speaker. Even once we settled that and we were in the service, I sat between the two of them, the rabbi and the imam on either side, but it all went well. And so we agreed to do it again the next year, and it was still tense, but it was better. And in fact, that year we were having a blood drive down in the activity room, and we agreed the three of us would immediately go down at the end of the service, and we'd be the first three different faiths to give blood together. And that was a big deal, seen as the rabbi was terrified of needles. And the imam had been fasting in preparation for Eid al-Adha. So that wasn't a good time to lose your blood. We went down, and as it turned out, the computers were malfunctioning, so we couldn't give blood anyway. Which made me wonder, because I've never had the ability to do that, which of those two had that secret? No, they didn't. But then, planning for our third year altogether, the Imam, Nader Taha, invited the rabbi, we had a new one by then, and me, to his house. To his house in Monroe Falls, to plan the service, and even more, just to be together, to share. And Nader, he set up his back patio, beautiful backyard, set it up with trays and teacups and in the midst of a waterfall, and he had this wonderful, strong, black Arabic tea and these pastries that I did not know anything about that were really common to his own community, and all sorts of fruit all cut up, and just a beautiful array. Just such a gracious host. We sat and we talked and we laughed and we shared and we enjoyed all that food. And then in the midst of that, it happened for me. I had an Emmaus moment right there in the backyard of an imam. Jesus was right there with me. Not Jesus in the rabbi or in the imam. No, it was simply a godly experience where I'd never expected it to happen. In fact, I was a little nervous going into that. Would the two of them get along? Would it be strange? Would they have food that not... In an awkward moment, but taking the risk, and there in that moment, God right there among us. But it wasn't until I was driving away later on that afternoon from Nader's house with a bag filled of the delicacies that he wanted to make sure my wife also got a chance to sample. And that's when I was trying to make sense of what I had felt. And that's when I realized if I take Jesus, if I take the idea of following Jesus, as Jesus said, follow me, if I take that seriously, then it made total sense. Think about it. Do you remember what happened on the road to Emmaus? There were those two friends of Jesus, two people who we would think knew him a little bit well, at least, and they were there. They were running from Jerusalem. They were running out of town in fear, just on the other side of Easter, afraid. They were fleeing the city, and they saw Jesus. Do you remember how they saw him? Anybody? As a stranger. They didn't recognize him. They were right beside him, and they didn't recognize him, and they walked. They had actually invited this stranger, this person on the road they didn't know, which was a dangerous thing to do, and they walked a good 7 miles with him. And then they got to the village where they were apparently going to stop out of fear and stay there, hide out for the night. And this stranger that they had walked with on the road that they didn't know or recognize, did you hear what Jeanette said? They urged him to stay with them. They urged him to stay with them because they knew that it was dangerous to be on the road at night in those days all by himself. So they urged him to stay with them. And sure enough, he stayed. And then they sat down and they ate together. These seemingly strangers, and were told that it's when Jesus, who they didn't know to be Jesus, when he broke bread, that's when they saw it. Jesus, God, right there with them. See how it happened? It happened when they took that risk of inviting a stranger out of care and out of love, even when they were fleeing town out of fear, when they invited him to walk with them and to stay with him, and then to say, come in and to share in a meal together. But going back to the beginning, some might protest, but a Christian, a Muslim, and a Jew? Again, this is about following Jesus. And think about it, Jesus, Go through the Gospels. It doesn't take much effort to do it. And you'll see that Jesus' critique, his criticism was limited almost solely to people inside his group, inside his faith, to his own, not pointing fingers out, but in. But he reached out and he offered that presence and that love, that healing to all people. Period, no matter what. And so many, we know so many followed, so many grabbed hold and traveled beside him. And there were undoubtedly people outside the faith. Imagine, even the disciples themselves. Although scholars, most biblical scholars say that there's good reason to believe that inner circle, the first 12, to believe that they were Jewish, there's actually no real proof that they were. And these two people that Jesus met on the roadside, they weren't a part of the original 12. So we really don't know much about their background. And the truth is, this is the crazy part, we don't even know where Emmaus is. The late Marcus Borg, famed New Testament scholar, told the story about a trip he took to the Holy Land, and the piece that he was the most looking forward to was going to Emmaus, to going to the site where Jesus broke bread with those two and became known to them. So finally on his trip, they went and there was a church that had been built on that spot. And he was so excited to get there, and they got there, and with the guide, and they went to go into the church, and the doors were locked. Somebody made a mistake. And he was really disappointed that this was going to be a highlight for him. And the Israeli tour guide that was taking them around, he could see the look on Borg's face. And he said to him, "Oh, don't worry. Don't worry. We'll just go to another Emmaus." Another Emmaus? That seems so weird. And it turns out there are at least no less than 4 places. 4 places that claim that is where Jesus broke bread with the two and was made known to them. At least 4 places known as Emmaus. And that's pretty great. For me, that means we don't know where Emmaus is. So Emmaus is where? Any place. Any place we need it to be. Maybe even in the backyard of an imam in Monroe Falls. So what's the point? If you want to know God in the now, alive, we actually need to place ourselves in the midst of those places that can be Emmaus moments. Jesus' friends, those two, they never would have had that moment if they hadn't gone and done what Jesus would do. You know, ask a vulnerable stranger in danger on the road to walk with them, to stay with them, and even to eat with them. Remember what happened when Jesus made that example too, when they had those thousands who were gathered on the hillside out in a remote place. Remember this in the gospel, and his closest inner circle said, "Send them away before they get crazy with hunger. Send them into town to get their own food." And what did Jesus say? No, you feed them. So these two followers, they did what Jesus would do. Even though they were fleeing Jerusalem in fear, they still stepped out in risk and in trust, reaching beyond their normal, comfortable routines. And that's where they found God, right there with them. Now this is really important. It's not what those two did that made it so that Jesus was with them. Jesus was there all along beside them. No, it's what they did that made them see what already was. And it's not just how and when God's presence is felt and known. Those are the moments also when we do those things in Jesus' way. That's when good can happen, when change can happen, when healing can take place. Those are the moments when we inch just a little closer, bit by bit, to the kingdom of God in the here and the now. In a broken, fractured world like ours, like it's been throughout history, we need to ask that question. In such a moment, what would Jesus do? Not in a simplistic fashion, not just quick look at the little bracelet and just make a quick decision, but really dig deep to understand in the fullness of Jesus, of God's being, what would God do? What would Jesus do? And then to do it. It's all there. It's right in the gospel. It's all in the Easter story. It's self-sacrificial. Jesus' love, Jesus' embrace, Jesus crossing those barriers that fragmented the world, that kept people out, meeting each and every person, creating community where it had been absent. So how do we do it? How do we do that in the now? There's so many ways. Each of us can do it on our own, and we need to ponder that. We need to wrestle with that. We need to open our hearts to understand our biases, our things that keep us from really understanding how Jesus would have us live. But I want to give just a couple of examples. One, First Serve, that it's coming up in September, but there's something new this year that I think is just really cool. It's not a service. Instead, it's an interaction, and we're going to be doing it this summer also as a trial run if you want to be a part of it. And then also on the day of First Serve, we're going to have food tours. We're going to go to multiple places to eat in North Hill, places of multiple cultures, backgrounds, ways of being, and places that many of us would be unlikely to encounter, and spend some time with the people there to come to know each other, just that little bit, just that little beginning, outside of many people's comfort zone, but by doing it, maybe an Emmaus moment. Or I think about just a few days ago, I was down at Grace House. Grace House in North Hill also, right there next to the old St. Thomas Hospital. It's not exactly what it is, but the best way to describe it, for those who don't know it, a hospice for those without homes. So taking people that otherwise would likely die out of doors, under a bridge, and instead giving some sense of humanity and care and love in those most trying of days. Well, I brought a friend down there to meet some of the leadership of Grace House, and while we were there talking about it, one of the residents grabbed hold of me and said, I need to talk to you before you leave. I don't have much time. And what do you want to get into? This, I could set up another time to do it, but begrudgingly, I finally broke away and I went and saw him, and it was this young guy, an addict throughout most of his days, and obviously in his last days now. And I went and I said, well, what do you want? And I thought he was going to come up with a list of things he was hoping that we could do for him. And I said, no. I just want to know if you'll pray with me. I felt like a fool. But in that moment, there was an Emmaus moment, and God was present in that time. Or I think about last Monday, Jalen Walker. No way to look at it other than tragedy. Such sadness of a young life ending way too soon. And when the grand jury made the decision not to indict any of the police, there were multiple news conferences, gatherings that were held, everything from the family to Akron authorities to a group that was calling for major protest, major whatever it might be. But then there was another group. And it was a group of business owners in the area and clergy from the area black and white, but more black than white. And they got together and they were calling for prayerful peace. They were calling for each of us to find in our hearts how to move forward in a way that brought healing, that brought everybody where they needed. And one of them was Gary Wyatt. He was here at the last service. Gary Wyatt is a friend of a lot of ours. He heads up the North Hill Community House. Lewis, you were there Thursday, weren't you? Helping out. And he was at that conference and he spoke. So I called him up Monday night and I said, Gary, what can we do? Just pray. Just pray. He said, well, tell me if there's anything else. And then the next morning we caught word that there was going to be a gathering in front of the courthouse, the police station, and the mayor's office, a time of prayer. So we called Gary and said, what do you know about this? And we talked for a while and we finally worked out, why don't we go together with Gary and a small group of us? And Gary was willing to do it because we build trust by staying together across the years. And we met there and we gathered in a large circle out in the street. There was no yelling and screaming, but there was also no acceptance that everything is just fine. Instead, it was an inward looking like Jesus did, talking to his own people about how can I be that change, help to make it less likely that another young life would end? How can I bring healing for that family? How can I bring healing for the city? How can I bring healing for some of the police officers devastated what happened? And there, black, white, people of all different forms of the Christian faith, rich, poor, inner city, suburban, gathered together. And then at a place that we kind of wondered, what are we getting into? We were really the only people from outside the city of Akron who went down there to be a part of that circle. And there was God. There was another Emmaus moment. I wonder this day, what do you and I need to do? Not to get so that God is with us, because God has always been there and always will be. But what are the things we need to do where we need to push the edge of our comfort, where we need to open our hearts a little bit more fully, where we need to open up relationship